Hello and welcome to Big Friendly Grub. I hope you're well, and I'm really looking forward to this episode of Big Friendly Grub today. That's not to say I don't enjoy or look forward to every single episode that I do for you guys, but I'm particularly looking forward to this one today because it gives me a real sense of nostalgia. The reason being is because what I'm going to show you today is probably one of the first things I taught myself to make after I'd moved out of my parents' house. When I moved out of my parents' place, I didn't know how to cook barely anything. I could barely cook a stir fry. That was pretty much the only thing I could cook. The reason I really didn't know how to cook anything is because my mum was such a good cook. I never had to really get into the kitchen. The only thing I can ever really remember making in the kitchen at home was a stir fry. And it wasn't the best stir fry in the world, to be honest. I probably kind of overcooked it. It didn't have that nice crisp crunch that you would expect from a stir fry. It was a bit soggy, and I think my mum and dad were being a bit polite when I made it, to be fair. So after I moved out of my parents' house, I barely knew how to cook anything. I'd moved in with some friends and it was just like, what the heck do I make? I don't know how to make anything. What do I do? I didn't want to be one of those people who lived off of like ready meals or anything like that. Ready meals have their place in the world, but they're not something you want to have every single day. Most satisfaction comes from making something yourself. It just tastes better, it just does, and that's not being conceited or nostalgic or anything like that. The simple fact of the matter is, if you make your own food, it's so much better than those ready meal stuff that you can pick up. Anyway, I am digressing massively. So I am a big lover of pies. I love a good pie.
The Rock loves pie.
Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's chicken and mushroom, steak and ale, anything like that. I love pies. But when I was first learning to cook, I didn't really know how to make pies. I didn't know how to make pastry. I didn't own a pie dish. So this made it problematic in how to make a pie. So what I'm going to show you how to make today is my shortcut pie. No, that's not me mispronouncing it. It's not a short crust pie, it's a shortcut pie. And the reason it's a shortcut pie is because you don't need a pie dish and you don't need to know how to make all sorts of things that make up a pie. It's going to be a chicken chorizo and leek pie, which is one of my favourite combinations to go into pretty much anything. And what we're going to use, instead of making a bechamel sauce, we are simply going to use some creme fraiche as our base for the sauce. This is so you don't have to worry about making up a bechamel sauce, which is butter, flour and milk. You don't have to worry about that. We're also going to be using pre-bought pastry, ready-made pastry, puff pastry, and so you don't have to worry about making your pastry either. And everything else is just going to be stuff that you can easily get hold in your supermarkets, that you'll probably have around the house anyway. The other thing about this recipe is you're not going to need a pie dish either, because we are going to be creating the pie between two sheets of puff pastry. You don't have to worry about rolling it out. You don't have to worry about trying to get it into you don't have to worry about getting it into a pie dish. It is all simple as it can be. This is a real treat for me. This is real nostalgia, because this is probably the first recipe that I came up with by myself. There's probably similar ones out there, there's probably adaptations out there, but this is the first thing I came up with that was like, oh, I know what's a good idea, let's try this. And it really worked. But enough preamble, that's enough background. I want to get on with showing you how to make my shortcut chicken chorizo and leek pies. First thing we're going to want to do is prepare our pie fillings, or at least some of them. So we're going to start off by preparing our chorizo. I've got one of these chorizo rings here that you can pick up pretty much in any supermarket, and I am going to use about half of this thing, which probably works out to about 110 grams ish. So I'm just chopping this thing in half, and then I am just going to cut it into slices like this. Try and keep them evenish thicknesses if you can. Probably a centimetre or two at most. Then once they're into slices like that, then chop them in half again, right down the middle. Doesn't have to be too even. So that's our chorizo chops, so I'm going to put that to one side. Next we're going to prepare our chicken, and I've got two fairly large chicken breasts here. This pie will probably serve about 3-4 people. Depends on how hungry you are, to be honest. So I'm just going to chop the chicken breast down the middle. Then these are going to be chopped into nice big chunks of chicken. So there we go, we've got our chicken breasts all chopped up, and I'm going to put those to one side as well. Then we're just going to need to prepare our leek. So I've got a nice big leek here, and what I'm going to do is top and tail it. So I've already taken off the outer leaves of this and given it a quick wash. So taking the top and the tail off, and then I'm just going to chop this straight down the middle. Be very careful of your fingers. And then I'm just going to chop this into even slices to give us nice strips of leek. That's our leek cut into strips. If you're not a fan of leek, you could also use red onion, which I think also goes very well with these flavours. I love red onion and I think it goes with most things. Also, the last thing that we need to prepare is 2 garlic cloves, which I have already crushed here because you don't really need to see me peel and crush garlic. Hopefully you'll have a garlic crusher at home. If not, you can just dice it really fine. That's good too. So that's all of our pie ingredients prepared. That's all the chopping and stuff we need to do. Really not much to it. So we now need to get these into a pan, start adding things to make the sauce and bring the pie filling together, and that won't take long at all. So let's go get on with that. Right, to get started with our pie filling, I've got a pan here over a fairly high heat. It's not super hot, but it's going to be hot enough to get our chorizo and chicken cooked. So I'm just going to start off by adding in the chorizo. You can hear that's got a lovely sizzle on it. I'm just going to cook this for a minute or two just to start to get some of these lovely oils out of the chorizo. My hope is that we'll get enough oil out of the chorizo so that we can cook most of the pie filling in the chorizo oils rather than adding any extra oil ourselves. So just keep moving around. You want to move them around, don't want to keep the chorizo in one place for too long because otherwise you'll start burning part of the chorizo. You can see a lot of smoke coming up off of here because of those oils. I might actually bring it down a notch and start to see, hopefully, some of those oils escaping from the chorizo. See, that's only been like a minute or so and we've already got a lovely load of oil out of this chorizo. So I am gonna grab the chicken and pop that in there, and I'm gonna move this around with the chorizo, and the chicken is going to take on the colour of this chorizo and it's going to be lovely. We're going to get that chorizo flavour into the chicken. Just want to cook the chicken until it's no longer pink. You don't want any pink bits on your chicken. It will continue to cook once it's actually in the pie and in the oven. We just want to make sure we get all the outside bits cooked and all white and no pink bits, because you can't have rare chicken, not unless you want to poison yourself. I sometimes see things on like social media and it's people like, if you don't have your chicken medium rare, do you even chicken bro? And I don't know if they're parody accounts or they're just doing it for the attention, but just in case, you can't have chicken rare, medium rare, it's got to be cooked all the way through. So that chicken looks like it is cooked all on the outside. I don't see any pink bits there. Like I say, it's probably not cooked all the way through, but it will finish cooking when the pie is in the oven. So at this stage, I'm getting a bowl and I'm just going to fish out the chicken and chorizo, pop it into that bowl because I want to keep all of those chorizo oils in that pan. I'm going to move those to one side. In goes the leek, and we're going to cook this leek in our oils, again getting our chorizo flavour onto everything. Just going to cook this leek in this oil for a couple of minutes, minute or two, before I add in the garlic. And this leek has already started to soften. So I'm going to get the garlic in there with it. Cook that in as well. We'll give this another minute. I'm already getting that garlic as soon as it's been added to the pan. It's amazing. Just keep moving your leeks and your garlic around. You don't want to get any like brown bits or black in any of this, because that will start to make the leeks and the garlic bitter, and we don't want that. We want the sweetness from the leeks and the lovely garlicky flavour. If you overcook garlic, it will burn and that will give it a really bitter flavour, and that's not what we're after. So our leeks and our garlic have been cooking together for a couple of minutes. So now I'm going to add in a couple of tablespoons. I found my tablespoon. It was in a bag of flour, not this one, a different one. So I'm going to add in a couple of tablespoons of just plain flour. This is going to thicken up the sauce when we make it. So we're going to get this flour onto the leeks and the garlic just for a minute or so. Just move around the leeks and the garlic and the flour just to cook out the raw flour taste. So that flour's cooked out, so I'm adding back in our chicken and chorizo. I'm going to move this around as well, get that all mixed and stirred together. Now that's all in together, I'm just going to add in 200 mils of chicken stock. We don't need a lot of it. This is just to give it some flavour. And we're just going to cook this down for a couple of minutes. This will thicken up quite quickly because of the flour in there. Any old chicken stock will do. A Knorr stock pot or a stock cube, whatever you've got knocking around. Obviously the nicer the stock, the nicer the pie, but the whole point of this is we're making it nice and easy for ourselves. So if you've got like if you've got homemade chicken stock knocking around, you probably won't need to make this pie. You could probably make a much nicer pie. But this is for our poor studenty type folk, or people who just CBA. This can't be asked. So you see that's thickened up really, really quickly. So I'm going to get our creme fraiche, give it a good shake. Do this before you take the top off. And I'm adding in a full 300 ml pot of creme fraiche. This is the half fat stuff, but this works just as well because we want it for the creaminess, not necessarily for the fat or anything in it. And we stir that into our stock and it will start taking on some of that colour of the stock. We've already got a nice creamy sauce coming together here. So after you've added in the creme fraiche, let that come back up to a nice bubble. So all we're going to need now is a bit of seasoning in here. So I'm going to add in a pinch of sea salt, some ground pepper. This is to taste. I love black pepper, so I'm adding in a good amount of this. Then lastly, a bit of ground thyme, probably about a teaspoon's worth, but I'm not going to measure. The point of this is they're not going to be accurate. And just stir that in as well. And we're just going to let our sauce cook down for a few minutes. We don't want it too runny or watery because we're not putting it into a pie dish, so we don't want it going everywhere. We're going to let it thicken up, which is what that flour will help it do. So my sauce has been cooking away for a good 5 minutes or so. I've been letting it bubble down, stirring it occasionally, and you can see it has thickened up. So if you move the spoon through it, it does fill in, but it's not too runny. It just takes a little bit of time to fill in. And that's about the thickness that we want it. You don't want it overly runny, but you don't want it so thick that you just cook away all of the sauce either. So that's looking pretty good. So what I'm going to do is, so I'm going to put this to one side and let it cool down for about 10 minutes. The reason being because when we put it into our pie or between our pastry sheets, we don't want it too hot to cause the pastry sheets to start to melt because they're puff pastry and they're buttery, and we don't want the butter to melt in the heat of the sauce. So we're going to let it cool down for 10 minutes. While that pie filling cools down, I'm just going to show you what you need for your next step of creating the pie. So you're going to need 2 of these. So this is 2 sheets of puff pastry. You could use the short crust, but I find the puff pastry is so much nicer for this. So these are ready-made. You can pick them up in pretty much any supermarket. They are vegan as well. Not that it matters for this recipe because we've got chicken and chorizo in it, but for future reference, they are vegan as well. And these are going to cut out so much work for us. We don't have to worry about rolling out pastry. We don't have to worry about making pastry. We're just going to use these, put them down 2 sheets, no forming of pie crust, no blind baking, no fuss, no mucking about. Just going to make it well easy for ourselves just using these. Because the pie filling has to cool down for about 10-15 minutes, good time to take these out of the fridge, let them kind of come up to room temperature, not quite room temperature. It will make them easier just to handle, and you know. Now our pie filling has had a good 10 to 15 minutes to cool down a little bit. We can now start forming our pie. Or to be more accurate, it's probably more like a big pasty or something like that. All will become clear in a few moments. So we're going to take one of our puff pastry sheets, and all I'm going to do is unroll this, just like that. You're going to want it on a baking sheet lined with some baking paper. Potentially you could use the stuff that it comes on, but I don't think it cooks too well in the oven, so I would not risk it. And I'm going to flip this over, pull this away, and that is going to be the base of our pie. That is it. We are not going to blind bake this or anything. So with that in place, I'm going to take our pie filling, grab a big old spoon, and then I'm just going to place this across the surface of our pie. Just spread it out as much as you can. It doesn't matter if there's gaps around the edges because, to be fair, that's what we're going to want. So I've got my pie filling all in the middle of this puff pastry sheet. There's at least a good inch all the way around. So what we're going to do now is we're going to need a beaten egg and a egg brush or pastry brush or whatever you want to call it. We're going to brush the outside with egg. Now with our second sheet of pastry, we're going to just roughly lay this over the top. So we've got our second sheet on top of here, fairly well lined up. Press down the edges lightly at first, like a big envelope or a big present. One of the best presents in my opinion. Big tasty present. Then you want to go grab a fork or something like that and just press down on the edges just to kind of crimp the pastry together. So with our edges crimped, I am going to now brush this again all over with our egg wash. Then last of all, you're just going to want to make a hole in the middle just to let off some steam. For the pie, I mean, if this lets off steam for you, that's all good. Then I'm just going to be a little fancy and I'm just going to do some light crisscross shapes in the top. I'm not cutting into it too much. I'm just using the back of the knife. Now that is ready to go into our oven. Now you could go even fancier with this. I could have trimmed off the edges. I've got a bit of excess pastry around here where I didn't quite have enough filling here, but I didn't want to go into that. This is about a quick, simple pie where you don't have to faff around too much. So I've left it exactly as is, kept the pastry sheets exactly the same size, and all I've done is just add some crisscrosses in the top to be a bit artsy-fartsy, that's it. So this is now ready to go into the oven. So I've preheated the oven to 200 degrees C, that's probably about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll put all the temperatures and ingredients and everything else into the YouTube description as normal, or you can go onto my website and find out the recipe there. So I'm just going to pop this in to our oven for a good 25 to 30 minutes. And we'll come back to that when it's all nice and golden brown. So I will see you then. So it has been exactly 25 minutes. Well, not exactly, but my alarm went off moments ago saying it's been 25 minutes. So it's been roughly 25 minutes. So I'm going to dive into the oven with my glove. And whoa, look at that. Look how puffy and golden and absolutely stonking that looks. To coin a phrase from Barry Lewis, that does indeed look stonking. That is one heck of basically a giant pasty, and that looks really good. You can see how much that has puffed up and risen up, and that looks amazing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this to probably just cool for about 10 minutes because the inside of that is going to be hideously hot, hideously hot. That will burn my face off. So just got to leave it to cool for 10 minutes, but it's lovely and crisp. You can probably hear that, lovely and crisp. So that is going to be absolutely lovely. So yep, going to leave that to cool, and we will be back in about 10 minutes or so, and I'll cut into it and we will give it a go. Can't wait. So this has had a good 10 minutes just to cool down, just so the inside of it isn't completely and utterly molten. It means I can eat it without giving myself third-degree burns, basically. You can see how lovely and crisp and golden that is. It's so big, I couldn't find a cutting board to fit it on. This is my display board that it's on, but underneath it's got another board and it doesn't quite fit on it. It's so big. But I'm going to attempt to cut this. Trying to cut this around the camera is tricky. I've just moved this to one side so I can get into it, and I'm just going to cut through this. You can hear how crisp that is. Oh. And I'm going to cut this into another slice. So I'm going to try and gently lift this off here. Look at that filling, just oozing out there. I'm going to get that onto the plate. So you can see it's like a giant pasty filled with chicken and chorizo and leek. And that is going to be so good. So I'm going to just get this out of the way so I can just finish preparing this, but that is looking really good. So I've got that all served up with some roasted vegetables, basically some roasted asparagus, a big old roasted carrot and some parsnips. And that is all it's going to need because that pie is going to be tasty. So there you go, there is our shortcut chicken chorizo and leek pie. As I said, it may not technically be a pie, it's probably more like a pasty how we've done it, but this is so much simpler than trying to create a pie in a pie dish and creating a sauce from scratch. By using that creme fraiche, we've done a quick and simple sauce, and using those 2 sheets of puff pastry, we've cut out the need for making our pie in a pie dish. So this is a lot simpler, and if you're fancying something like this, I can highly recommend giving this a go. So I'm going to give this a quick try. I've already cut myself a piece off. So, That is absolutely delicious. Because we've used that chorizo, the smokiness and the flavour of it seeps into the sauce that we've made, and it soaks into the chicken and everything we've done. And you just get that lovely hit of chorizo all the way through it. It was really, really good, and that pastry on top is lovely. The bottom isn't as crisp as you would normally get if you were to properly blind bake a pie. But to be honest, I don't mind a little bit of a soggy bottom. In this instance, it just works. Honestly, if you're hankering for a pie but you don't have the time, or you don't have loads and loads of fancy ingredients around, I suggest giving this a try. It works so well and people will love it. It's so good. So that's it from me. That was my shortcut chicken chorizo and leek pie. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it useful. If you're looking for more quick and simple dinner ideas, let me know. I will try and endeavour to try and make some. Otherwise, I'm going to head off and enjoy this, have my dinner, enjoy a while and sit down. And I will see you on the very next Big Friendly Grub. Take care, guys. Bye.